Welcome to my channel, it's Blank Arts 3D, and today in this video I will be showing you how to print, process, and paint Bloodhound's Heirloom, the Raven's Bite. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Alright, if you're new to my channel, here are all the materials that I use for post-processing my prints. Palm sander, this X-Acto knife, this toothbrush, any old used toothbrush to get the dust off from when you sand. This Bondo glazing spot putty, so to fill in like either holes or gaps or cracks in the prints. This smaller sander for the more finer details. This dust mask is you want to use a dust mask for when you sand your prints because you don't want to inhale the little dust particle. You want to wear some eye protection just so you don't get any of the dust particles in your eyes. Various tapes for when I have to paint my prints. Another one right here. And then for when I do have to spray paint my prints, I use a filtrated mask so that way you don't inhale the chemicals from the prints. I have these paint pens that you can use for the finer details. This soldering iron that I use to weld my prints together, like super glue, good enough to kind of hold the prints together, and then when it's held together, then I use my soldering iron. A bunch of different colored spray paints that I use. Most of them are Rust-Oleum. I really like Rust-Oleum. Most of these items I actually bought off of Amazon, but if you don't want to do that, you can also just look at local hardware stores or art stores. Okay, so starting with the prints and where I got them. So I just went on Thingiverse and found this Bloodhound Heirloom Apex Legends model by NK Orange, and I only printed these pieces, these 4 pieces. He has other stuff, or she has other stuff that you can print. I didn't print any of those. I just got these ones. So once I downloaded the files for these, I used Ultimaker Kira. This is how I oriented the models, and for these 3, they printed out just fine. I had, if you take a look, this is how I oriented my supports. These didn't really need supports. This one didn't need supports. I used supports for these and they came out, just fine. And then I made sure that this would be able to print as well. So I just used general supports. And as for this, the Raven head was probably the toughest part to really figure out how to print. So I printed it upside down and I just used, the manual supports on the top of the head. The reason why I didn't use the generate support options was because when I tried to do that the first time, Raven's head, these pieces right here, the feathers, it prints out really thin. So trying to take off the supports, the fully generated supports, was a little bit rough, and it ended up like breaking and cracking, these. And it also generate supports inside here that I couldn't get to. So I just used these manual supports, and it printed out okay. I'll show you later the downside of not having the actual supports, but I think it's something that we can still fix post-processing. If you want to give it a shot and try to print with the supports, you can go ahead and see if that's easier for you, but I thought this might be easier to just do post-processing wise and just print like this. For this print, I used my Creality Ender 3 Pro that I got off of Amazon for about $200, and I just used a regular white filament PLA. Okay, so during the print, I ran out of filament, and so that's why I have these unfinished looking parts where you can still see the infill. And all I did was, like reprint, like example for this, I just had to reprint it, and then I'm just gonna have to glue it back on. That's just an extra step, that I have to do. It's still doable. It's just gonna take a little bit longer because we have to add glue extra parts, but it shouldn't be too bad. And then here is the Raven's head that I was talking about that I printed without supports. So if you can see kind of like stringy parts, that's the part that wasn't supported. So you'll get that, and I'll see if I can, during post-processing, see if I can fix that by just using the soldering iron to kind of smooth it out and see if it looks good that way. But we'll figure it out. Let's get started. I'm gonna put on my my mask. Oh yeah, also when you're using this, make sure you also have a mask. And then I did use brim so that it wouldn't warp. So I'm gonna have to take the brims off, and then I'm gonna use this to smooth out the bottoms, and then we can put them together. Okay, so now that all of the brims have been removed, we can start gluing the pieces together and welding them. So when I'm doing this, all I'm really doing is fusing the seams together so that way that the plastic from both ends are kind of overlapping each other. I'm not really making any deep cuts. I'm trying to join the surface of the plastics together. Okay, so now that I've got the surface of the plastics welded together, you can see where the weld line is. What I like to do is just take, cut off pieces of the actual filament roll, and then what I'll do is I'll put it like this, and then I'll just weld it over where it was, and then try to flatten it as much as I can. Okay, so that's one side done. I've got it as flat as I could get it without melting the plastic, without melting the actual, axe head itself. I'm gonna go do this side and then do the other side, and then we'll do the rest of the axe and weld it together, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now I'm just gonna, continue to do it with the other parts, move on to the other parts, glue them together, weld it together. Same step process until the whole axe is pretty much put together. Now, because this tip barely has any weight to it, it's such a small part that I am not going to add the extra filament around it. Now, by all means, you can if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary, and I think it'll save me time if I don't, because this has pretty much no weight to it, and I don't think it's gonna fall off if I shake it around just by having the surface plastics welded together. Now again, like I said, this would be so much easier if the prints came out properly. You wouldn't have to do these extra steps. You could just, or the modeler of the print even made these little sockets, where you can just insert and weld and glue together. So this is just taking a little bit longer because I have to, go through the extra process of gluing the parts that didn't print properly. So for this part, I'm gonna have to sand it down just a little, because with the print, they tend to print a little bit larger than they should because it kind of melts. So it's not fitting properly, so I'm gonna have to sand it down just a little so that I can get it into the socket. Okay, so I started with the 120, and then I went to the 240 just to make it a little bit smoother, and we'll see if it goes in a little bit easier. Okay, so that's the best I could get it. You can see that there's a pretty big gap, pretty big seam through it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go all the way around with the filament, cover it up, seal it up. It's pretty sturdy. It's not moving around. I'll just cover that up and sand it down, and then use some Bondo to make it look like it's one smooth part of the axe. Okay, so now that the axe body has been welded together, next thing we need to do is we're gonna fix. So a lot of these flatter parts, I can probably just sand it down. And then for these feathers that are kind of stringy, I'll try it to a soldering iron to flatten it down, and we'll see how that looks. Now remember, when you're doing this, the soldering iron is very hot, so when you put it on the plastic, just make sure you're not leaving it for a very long time because it melts really fast. So just kind of like do the small dabs. Another tip is, if the plastic is getting too hot and it's starting to warp, don't continue to work on that part. Work on a different part and then come back to it when it's re-hardened, so that way you're not continuously adding heat to the same part and it's just gonna continue to melt. So The faster you try to cut corners, you know, you'll probably end up melting the plastic even more, and then you're gonna have to start over. Definitely doesn't look perfect. There's a whole bunch of melted areas that I probably could fix a lot better if I turned down the heat on the soldering iron and then kind of, you know, take my time smoothing it out. At least it looks better than the stringy parts that we had before. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do is, now that we've got, you know, that fixed and we've got this put together, we're gonna put some Bondo on the parts that we welded together and then fill in the holes and the gaps to make it look like there's no weld lines. So I'll just put a little bit on the blade, try my best to make it as flat as possible, and apply it to the areas that need to be, the welded areas that need to be kind of flattened out. You might need to do multiple layers depending on how deep the holes are, and it'll look a lot better once we sand it down. So okay, so now we've got Bondo on all the places that we've welded. We're gonna let it dry for a bit. About 10 minutes should be good enough. Let it dry and then we can start sanding. But while I'm waiting for this to kind of dry off, I'm gonna put some Bondo. Okay, so now that the Bondo has kind of dried off, let's begin sanding. So like I said, I'm gonna start with the 120 grit, and then I'll just sand as much as I can. When you're sanding it, just remember not to just go over the putty, because you want as much of the print to be smooth as possible. So go over the putty and go over the entire print as well, because the goal is to try to make the print as smooth as possible without having layer lines. And be careful with the amount of pressure that you're using, because you don't want to break the print. So what I like to do is I like to put support on the back side so it doesn't like break the print. Once you start sanding, you're also going to start to notice parts of the print that definitely need to be covered up with Bondo. Here there's some holes and gaps in the print that will make it look really streaky once I put the primer on it. So what I like to do is, as soon as I discover it, I like to put the Bondo on it. Okay, after going over it with the 240 grit, it definitely feels so much smoother. I'm gonna make it even smoother by going over it with the 320. After going over it with the 320, it definitely already feels so smooth. So I'm gonna keep it at 320, and then I think this is ready to prime. But before I get there, I forgot that I had the Raven's head that I still need to sand. So I'm gonna do this, and then we're gonna go prime both pieces. Okay, so for the primer, I've got this 2-in-1 fillable sandable primer. You want to make sure that you're doing light layers so that there's no so that it's not like running, so the primer doesn't look like it's dripping everywhere. Prime one side as best as you can. Try to do the sides if you can reach it, and then 10 minutes, set a timer, come back to it, flip it over, set another timer, 10 minutes, and it should be done. And once you know the axe is primed, you're gonna see some parts that you didn't see before that the filler couldn't fill in, so because it was too deep. So you're gonna need to go back and get some Bondo and fill them in. So like those holes are definitely too deep for the primer. A bunch of layered lines there that were too deep for the primer too. Put a light coat of Bondo on it, and then the good thing about filler and sandable, the 2-in-1 primer, is that, you know, it's a filler for one, and also you can resand it and it'll work just fine. Okay, so I've got it resanded, and I filled in the holes, and now, so I'm gonna reprime it again. Now that the primer is dry, we can start painting it with the actual color now. I'm gonna use this Krylon gloss black. I prefer Rust-Oleum, but for now it works. For this, I'll do lighter layers just because in the past I've had experience with this and it seems to not stick very well and it seems to be runny, so I'll do lighter layers on this one. Okay, so I'm going to come back in about 30 minutes, add another layer, and then flip it over and then do the same thing. This part takes the longest just because you have to wait for the paint to dry. I've made a mistake in the past before of not letting it wait long enough for it to dry and then touching it and then getting fingerprints on it because it was still wet. So be patient and do other things while you're waiting for it to dry. The axe is pretty much dry. I'm gonna do the part of the axe head where it's supposed to be glowing red. So I'm gonna use this Rust-Oleum apple red gloss red, and we're just gonna do it light coat on the side here. And what I'm doing is I'm working my way in slowly, just so I don't paint too much of the axe head. Okay, so normally I'd wait for it to dry, but since the axe head isn't touching the ground itself, or not the ground, the base, it's lifted up, so it's not gonna touch anything. It's gonna stay like that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn it over now and do the other side, and then wait for it to both dry at the same time. All right, let's wait for that to dry, and then we'll put it all together. Now that we've got it all put together, the last thing we gotta do is color the raven's eyes red. So I'm gonna use my red paint pen and to fill it in, and then we should be good. Okay, bam. So there's that. We're pretty much done. The only thing I know that Raven's Bite or Bloodhound's Heirloom has the little cords that wrap around the handle. And then as well as up here as well. You can do that if you want, but you know, for this video we're just kind of showing you how to print, process, and finish the actual axe itself. So if you want, feel free to go buy some cords or whatever from the store, and then put them on to make it a more finished look. But this is the final product. Thank you so much for watching this Bloodhound Heirloom build. Subscribe to my channel to follow along for more creations. Also, let me know down in the comments below on what you want to see me make next. And you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and also check out my Etsy store if you don't feel like building these and you just want to purchase them. Most of the things that I make on this channel is listed on my Etsy store. And if you do decide to make these, tag me on Instagram so I can see how it turned out for you. Again, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next print.